The wind swept across Resurrection Bay, carrying with it the promise of another harsh storm. Liz knew this place. She had navigated these frigid Alaskan waters for decades, diving beneath their surface and walking the lonely rocky shores as a ranger who once thought herself immune to nature's brutality. But the disappearance of the Sea Whisper 7 years ago had changed everything. The vessel, crewed by rugged men hardened by ice and isolation, vanished without a trace, her father among them. At first, it was ruled a tragic accident. Violent storms, rogue waves, endless ice dangers any Alaskan mariner knew all too well. But the whispers persisted, rumors crawling quietly through taverns and docks, settling like shadows over the coastal village of Seward. Liz stood at the water's edge now, staring into the steel-gray expanse, feeling the familiar bite of salt spray against her cheeks. The sky churned above dark clouds folding in on themselves. She tightened her coat around her body, her breath visible in the chilled air, mixing with the mist rising from the water. In her pocket, she clenched a faded photograph, her father and his crew, their faces stern, yet hopeful. A portrait taken mere days before they disappeared. The image haunted her dreams, filled with silent cries for answers. Returning now felt like reopening an old wound, raw and unhealed, yet unavoidable. "There's nothing left out there, Liz," the village harbor master had warned her just hours ago, eyes cast down, voice low and weary from repeating himself. "Just ghosts beneath the waves." But Liz knew differently. She'd studied the tides, the currents, the rhythms of Resurrection Bay like a scholar. She had survived in environments as unforgiving as this one because she trusted instincts sharpened by nature's relentless testing. Yet even she felt the heavy dread twisting inside her, deep and primal. A seagull's cry cut sharply through the air, pulling her gaze upward. The bird hovered against the wind, battling invisible forces. Liz felt kinship with its defiance. Today, she would dive again, deeper this time, pushing further than anyone dared. Turning from the shore, she headed toward her boat, every step pulling her closer to the lingering mystery. Her father had taught her courage, caution, and respect for nature's unpredictable moods. But he'd also left behind the cruelest of lessons. Sometimes the greatest danger wasn't nature itself, but those who navigated its darkest waters. Liz took a slow, steadying breath. Her hand brushed instinctively against the dive gear, resting heavily on the deck equipment, tested and retested obsessively. There was no turning back now. The Sea Whisper awaited her in the cold depths, holding secrets far darker than anyone could have imagined. Liz's boat moved gently with the waves as she guided it toward the heart of Resurrection Bay, the engine's low hum blending into the silence of the morning. The coastal town of Seward shrank behind her, its modest cluster of buildings swallowed gradually by mist and distance. Even from afar, she could sense the unease that hung over the town, an unspoken truth masked by polite nods and averted gazes. Docking had brought back memories she'd tried hard to bury. She recalled how years ago, grief had seeped into every home, every conversation tinged with mourning and speculation. Now, as she prepared to dive into the frigid waters, that old grief felt fresh again, reawakened and raw. As she neared the coordinates logged meticulously into her GPS, Liz double-checked her gear methodically, her movements mechanical, in an attempt to ground her racing thoughts. Her breathing steadied as she donned the thick neoprene suit, insulated gloves, and diving mask. Each piece of equipment offered security, yet each was also a reminder of the risks she faced. The weather was worsening, darkening skies, hinting ominously at the storm to come. But Liz had spent years navigating nature's moods and understood its warnings intimately. Hesitation was not an option. She had waited long enough. Lowering herself carefully into the water, the initial shock of cold stole her breath. Muscles constricting momentarily in instinctive protest. Her body acclimated gradually, the chill becoming bearable, if not comfortable. Beneath her lay darkness, the ocean's secrets, guarded by layers of murky water and treacherous currents. She descended methodically, her heartbeat steady despite the dread coiling inside her chest. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the silence grew, the surface world a distant memory above. Her flashlight cut weakly through the gloom, illuminating fleeting glimpses of marine life, startled by her intrusion. Then, emerging slowly from the shadowed depths, the skeletal remains of the Sea Whisper came into view. The vessel lay unnaturally still, preserved eerily by the icy waters. Liz's pulse quickened, emotions tangling within her: grief, curiosity, fear. Approaching cautiously, her flashlight beam danced over the hull, searching for any sign, any clue. Suddenly, her breath caught sharply, bubbles escaping in a startled burst. Etched crudely into the ship's hull, illuminated starkly by her trembling beam, was a message scratched desperately into metal: "Traitor on board." The words sent a chill deeper than the surrounding water ever could. Liz hovered motionless, the revelation gripping her, redefining the tragedy she thought she understood. Nature had claimed these men, but someone aboard had betrayed them first. Liz lingered suspended in the icy silence, eyes fixed on the jagged letters etched into the hull, feeling an almost physical weight pressing against her chest. Questions flooded her mind, each more troubling than the last. Who had carved those desperate words? Who had they accused? She slowly circled the wreckage, her flashlight probing for further clues, shadows flitting like ghosts over rusted metal and peeling paint. Every detail seemed infused with significance, yet revealed nothing more concrete than the haunting message she had already discovered. Her oxygen gauge beeped quietly, a sharp reminder that her time below was limited. With reluctant caution, Liz began ascending the Sea Whisper, fading slowly beneath her. Breaking the surface, she inhaled deeply, the cold air biting her lungs, the harsh daylight momentarily blinding. Back aboard her boat, she stripped off her dive gear mechanically, her mind still trapped below, tangled in unanswered questions. The return to shore was swift, propelled by urgency and anxiety. Docking once more at Seward, she sensed eyes watching her, their hidden judgments and silent suspicions resurfacing. The deckhand, elderly and weathered by decades of salt and wind, approached hesitantly. "Find anything down there?" he asked softly, eyes cautious. Liz considered her response carefully, finally shaking her head slightly. "Just ghosts," she said, voice subdued. "Old ghosts." But even as she spoke, she knew there was far more to uncover. The town had secrets buried as deeply as the ocean itself, whispered truths that lingered unspoken, cloaked in silence and denial. Liz glanced towards the village tavern, knowing it would soon fill with fishermen and locals whose memories stretched back decades. The harbor master caught her eye as she passed, his expression guarded yet curious. She hesitated briefly, then stepped closer, her voice low and deliberate. "The Sea Whisper wasn't just lost," she murmured, watching his reaction carefully. "Someone sabotaged it." His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something: recognition or perhaps fear passing quickly behind them. "Careful, Liz," he muttered, glancing away. "There's folks here don't want old wounds reopened." Liz tightened her jaw, determination hardening within her. Maybe those wounds never closed. Turning abruptly, she walked steadily towards the tavern, every step reinforcing her resolve. Resurrection Bay had revealed its first secret, but Liz knew more lurked beneath the surface, secrets powerful enough to silence an entire town. She pushed open the tavern door, warmth and noise spilling out, enveloping her. But beneath the welcoming veneer lay a tension as thick and oppressive as the ocean depths. Liz took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready to confront the darkness that had claimed her father. Inside the tavern, the comforting smell of aged wood, stale beer, and burning logs mingled, creating an illusion of warmth and safety. Yet Liz felt neither. Conversations dimmed as patrons took notice of her arrival, eyes darting her way before quickly returning to their drinks. She made her way carefully toward an empty stool at the end of the bar, acutely aware of the silence following her like a shadow. The bartender, an older woman named Irene, whose rough hands told of countless hours gutting fish and serving drinks, regarded Liz with a blend of sympathy and suspicion. "It's been a long time," Irene said quietly, sliding a steaming mug of coffee across the counter. "Not long enough," Liz murmured, her gaze drifting toward a group huddled around a corner table. Among them was a familiar face, Captain Greg, the former master of the Sea Whisper. His grizzled features hardened by years at sea, and the bitterness of loss remained stoic as he watched her approach. Greg shifted slightly, making room at the table. "You shouldn't have come back," he said gruffly, eyes steady but tinged with sadness. "I found the ship," Liz said bluntly, observing each man's reaction carefully. Surprise flickered momentarily across Greg's face, followed quickly by guarded neutrality. Around him, uneasy glances passed among his companions. "Did you?" Greg leaned forward, the lines around his eyes deepening. "And did it answer your questions?" Liz hesitated, noting the tension radiating from those around him. Someone aboard the Sea Whisper wrote something, "Traitor on board." "Do you know what that means?" Greg's jaw tightened, his eyes clouding with old pain. Paranoia claimed that crew long before the storm ever did. Ed was always jumping at shadows, Dave had debts eating him alive, and Marty was too young, too easily influenced. Who knows what really happened out there? Yet you survived. Liz pressed gently, her tone probing. Greg stiffened, his voice dropping low. "I wasn't aboard that final trip. Maybe that's the only reason I'm here now." His words hung heavily weighted by an unspoken accusation. Liz scanned the others at the table faces weathered by years of secrets and suspicion. Each man avoided her gaze, their silence louder than any denial could be. Liz stood slowly, the chair scraping loudly across the wooden floor. "Secrets can't stay buried forever," she warned softly, eyes locked on Greg's. "I wish you luck, Liz." Greg murmured, regret coloring his tone. "But be careful what you dig up. Some truths are better left drowned." As Liz stepped back into the biting cold, Greg's warning echoed in her mind. She knew he was right. Yet the haunting inscription beneath the waves demanded answers and justice. She tightened her coat, bracing against the wind, and the revelations she knew were yet to come. Liz returned to her boat, Greg's warning echoing relentlessly in her thoughts as the wind howled across the darkening bay. She sat heavily, breathing deeply, her mind sorting through fragmented pieces of conversations, half-truths and silences. Each encounter had deepened the mystery, each answer only raised more questions. Nightfall cloaked Resurrection Bay in oppressive darkness, punctuated only by distant flickers from village lights and stars struggling through heavy clouds. Liz knew sleep would elude her tonight. Instead, she pored over old maps and her father's meticulously kept logs, searching for something she'd missed, any clue that might illuminate the Sea Whisper's fate. Her fingers traced the worn pages, the handwriting familiar, yet distant. Dates, coordinates, weather observations, crew interactions, her father had recorded everything. Her pulse quickened when she noticed an entry she'd previously overlooked. It mentioned unusual engine troubles, recurring yet inexplicable malfunctions. She leaned closer, heart pounding as she considered the implications. Could sabotage have started long before that final voyage? Driven by urgency, Liz checked her watch. Midnight was nearing the village now, quiet and sleeping. Determined, she donned warm layers, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped onto the dock. The boat creaked softly beneath her feet, waves lapping rhythmically, the familiar sounds offering little comfort now. She made her way quietly toward a ramshackle boathouse at the end of the pier, known to belong to Dave, the former first mate who'd been aboard the Sea Whisper. The building sagged precariously, weathered by harsh winters and relentless storms. Her heart thumped as she approached cautiously, senses alert. Inside, the air smelled of grease fish and stale cigarettes. Liz moved quietly among cluttered shelves, eyes scanning for anything significant. Suddenly, her beam caught a glimpse of rusted metal tools scattered carelessly across a workbench. Amid them, stained darkly with oil and overlooked by years of neglect, lay a wrench. Liz picked it up slowly, her breath hitching. Her fingers traced the greasy marks, her mind flashing back to the submerged hull, the sabotage hinted at by those desperate carvings. The wrench was marked clearly, the initials MJ, Marty Jensen. A chill ran through her, deeper than the night's cold could explain. Marty had been the youngest aboard, seemingly innocent and vulnerable. Could he truly have betrayed them all? Outside, a distant door slammed shut, snapping Liz from her reverie. Quickly, she pocketed the wrench, retreating into shadows as footsteps approached. Her pulse raced, adrenaline surging. Whoever was coming knew this place as well as she did, and they weren't expecting company. Liz pressed back into darkness, breath shallow and quiet, the heavy silence broken only by the approaching steps. Secrets she'd sought were unraveling, but danger now loomed closer than ever. Liz flattened herself against the rough wall, heart hammering as the footsteps paused just outside the boathouse door. She strained to listen over the roar of blood in her ears, fingers clutching the wrench tightly, knuckles whitening. The door creaked open slowly, casting a thin sliver of pale moonlight across the cluttered interior. The figure stepped inside, silhouetted starkly against the night sky, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with cautious familiarity. Liz's breathing halted momentarily, recognition dawning with cold dread. It was Dave, the Sea Whisper's former first mate, his features partially obscured by shadows, yet unmistakable. He moved deliberately, scanning the shelves, clearly searching for something specific. Liz held her breath, silently praying he wouldn't discover her hiding place. Dave muttered quietly to himself, frustration evident as he sifted through scattered tools and debris, unaware he was being watched. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he stepped back, running a weary hand through his thinning hair. "Damn it, Marty," he whispered bitterly, his voice filled with regret. "Where did you put it?" Liz's pulse quickened, her suspicions flaring anew. She stepped forward, suddenly aiming the flashlight beam directly into Dave's startled eyes. He flinched sharply, hand shielding his face. "What are you doing here, Dave?" she demanded, voice steadier than she felt. "Looking for this?" She held out the wrench, its oil-stained surface catching the dim glow. Dave stared at her eyes, narrowing slightly. "Liz," he murmured, voice tight with unease, "you shouldn't be involved in this." "Too late," she retorted, gripping the wrench tightly. "Why was Marty's wrench hidden here? What really happened aboard the Sea Whisper?" Dave hesitated, eyes flickering uncertainly. "I didn't sabotage the ship," he finally said, voice low and heavy. "But I think Marty did. He was desperate, paranoid about Ed. Ed had lost touch with reality, completely convinced someone was out to get him. Marty was scared enough to act rashly." Liz's heart twisted at the thought. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "Because there was no proof," Dave replied bitterly. "Only suspicion. And who'd believe me, drowning in debt, desperate and disgraced?" "You owe them the truth," Liz insisted firmly. "We owe them." Dave shook his head slowly, exhaustion and sorrow etched deeply into his features. "Maybe the truth is worse than not knowing," he whispered. "Maybe it's too late for justice." Liz tightened her jaw, resolve strengthening. "It's never too late." Dave stared at her, defeated yet oddly hopeful. "Then be careful," he warned softly. "Whoever hid that wrench won't want their secrets found." Liz nodded slowly, understanding the warning clearly. As she stepped out into the cold night once more, she knew her path was set dangerous but necessary. Resurrection Bay still hid dark truths, and she intended to uncover them all. Liz hurried back to her boat, the wrench heavy in her pocket, Dave's warning still fresh in her mind. The harbor was deserted, darkness draped thickly over the sleeping village. She boarded quietly, her breath visible in the frigid night air, as she prepared the small cabin for the night thoughts swirling restlessly through her head. Sleep proved elusive, the day's revelations echoing ceaselessly. Liz lay awake, the boat gently rocking beneath her, creaking softly in the rising wind. Finally abandoning the struggle, she sat up, wrapped herself in a heavy coat, and stepped onto the deck. The bay lay quiet beneath an oppressive cloud cover, the stars obscured the wind, whispering ominously. As dawn broke pale and uncertain, Liz knew her next move. She had to speak to Ed, the mechanic whose paranoia had been at the center of the ship's unraveling. Gathering her resolve, she navigated the short drive to Ed's isolated cabin on the outskirts of town. Ed's home was little more than a shack, weather-beaten and leaning precariously. Rusted tools littered the yard, discarded relics of a life spent battling machinery and suspicion. Liz knocked firmly, the sound echoing through the silence. Moments later, the door creaked open slightly, revealing a thin sliver of Ed's wary, aged face. "Liz," he murmured, eyes darting suspiciously around her. "What do you want?" "Just to talk," she replied carefully. "About the Sea Whisper." His eyes narrowed, but after a tense moment he nodded and stepped back, opening the door wider. Inside the cabin was cramped, dim, cluttered with mechanical parts and scattered papers. Ed sat heavily, hands shaking slightly as he gestured for Liz to sit. "It wasn't my fault," he whispered urgently, eyes wide and pleading. "They thought I was crazy, paranoid, but I was right. Someone was sabotaging the ship, breaking the engine bit by bit. Liz watched him carefully. Do you know who? Ed's gaze faltered, fear creeping into his expression. Marty, he finally whispered, voice barely audible. He seemed harmless, innocent even, but he wasn't. He was terrified of me, of Greg, of Dave, terrified we'd find out what he'd done. Why didn't anyone stop him? Liz pressed gently. Nobody believed me, Ed said bitterly, his voice shaking. They thought I was delusional. Marty was young, he seemed honest, trustworthy, but he knew exactly what he was doing. Ed's eyes filled with a haunted despair. I survived by accident. I wasn't supposed to. Marty left me stranded ashore, sabotaged the radio, and took them all to sea. He didn't care about them, he was trying to save himself. Liz sat back, heart heavy, struggling with the chilling implications. Ed's words painted a grim picture, one where trust was betrayed and innocence was an illusion. Rising slowly, she met Ed's fearful gaze. I'll find the truth, she promised quietly. Stepping out into the cold morning, Liz felt the weight of those lost souls pressing heavily upon her. Justice awaited buried beneath layers of deception and fear, but she was determined to uncover it. Liz's drive back to the harbor felt longer than it had earlier, the landscape seeming heavier under the burden of new revelations. Ed's haunted confession lingered, gnawing persistently at her conscience. Marty. The boyish deckhand was now painted in shades of suspicion and betrayal she struggled to reconcile with her memory. Returning to her boat, Liz found Greg waiting at the dock, his figure stark against the backdrop of swirling mist. His expression was grave eyes, wary. Heard you spoke with Ed, Greg stated quietly, voice tinged with caution. I did, Liz replied, stopping just short of him. He mentioned Marty. Greg exhaled, slowly glancing away. I had my suspicions, he admitted reluctantly. But no one wanted to believe Marty could do it. He seemed too young, too innocent. Why didn't anyone investigate further? Liz challenged, frustration edging into her tone. People wanted closure more than truth, Greg said bitterly. Sometimes the truth is harder to bear. Liz shook her head resolutely. I can't live with that. They deserve better, and so do we. Greg regarded her silently, respect mingling with resignation. Then let me help you, he offered finally. I have access to records logs, financial documents, things the others might have overlooked. Maybe there's something there. Liz hesitated, considering carefully. All right, she agreed softly. But understand, I'm following this to the end, no matter where it leads. Greg nodded solemnly. I wouldn't expect anything less. Together they moved swiftly toward the harbor master's office, an aging building that creaked under the weight of wind and time. Inside, Greg retrieved worn files from a locked cabinet, setting them carefully on the cluttered desk. Liz watched intently as he flipped through pages, pausing occasionally, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Suddenly, Greg stopped, his expression darkening. This, he murmured grimly, handing Liz a faded invoice. It listed engine parts, ordered under Marty's name, parts that were incompatible, likely causing the very malfunctions Ed had described. Liz's heart sank further. Marty's betrayal seemed undeniable, now his actions calculated and deliberate. The weight of this truth pressed heavily upon her shoulders. Greg sighed deeply, breaking the tense silence. Now you know, he said quietly. The truth, ugly as it is. Liz raised her eyes, determination igniting fiercely within them. But there's more. We need to find Marty and hear it from him. Greg stared back steadily. Then be careful, Liz. Desperation can drive a man to do terrible things. I'm ready, Liz assured him, resolve hardening in her voice. As they stepped back out into the storm-threatening daylight, Liz braced herself for whatever awaited, committed to facing the truth head-on, no matter how painful or dangerous. Liz and Greg hurried toward Marty's last known residence, a secluded cabin deep within the dense forest bordering Resurrection Bay. The path was rugged, winding, and overgrown. Each step forward felt like venturing deeper into uncertainty. The sky above darkened ominously, clouds roiling with the threat of an impending storm. The cabin finally emerged through the trees, dilapidated and partially reclaimed by nature. Liz paused, studying the scene carefully. Something felt profoundly wrong. Windows shattered, door ajar. It spoke of abandonment, or perhaps something darker. "Stay close," Greg cautioned softly, voice taut with unease. Together they approached, cautiously, senses heightened by the eerie silence. Liz nudged the door open, the creak loud and grating in the tense stillness. Inside the room was disheveled furniture, overturned papers scattered across the floor. Greg bent down, picking up a crumpled note. His expression hardened as he handed it to Liz. The scribbled handwriting, desperate and frantic, was unmistakably Marty's. "I had no choice. Ed knew Dave suspected. If I hadn't acted, they would have ended me. Forgive me." Liz's stomach tightened sharply, the raw honesty in the note shredding her remaining illusions. A sudden sound from outside, breaking branches, hurried footsteps snapped both of their heads around. Liz bolted from the cabin, Greg close behind, chasing the fleeing figure through the dense undergrowth. The forest closed tightly around them, branches whipping their faces, roots threatening to trip their steps. Ahead, the figure stumbled, tumbling roughly to the ground. Breathing hard, Liz caught up flashlight beam illuminating the face that now stared back at her in terrified desperation. Marty, older now, haggard eyes wild with fear. "Don't hurt me," he begged, voice breaking, hands raised defensively. "Marty." Liz gasped, breathless but steady, stepping forward cautiously. "Tell me why." Marty trembled, his voice choked with anguish. "Ed's paranoia was real. He would have killed us all eventually. I had to act first. I never meant for it to end like this." "You sabotaged the ship," Greg accused bitterly, anger barely contained. "Men died because of you." Marty shrank back, at tears streaming down his face. "I wanted to disable it, force them ashore, stop Ed. But the storm, it was too strong. I lost control." Liz's heart ached at his broken confession. This wasn't calculated evil, it was fear and tragic desperation. Yet the consequence had been devastating. "You must face this," Liz said softly, resolute yet compassionate, "for their sake and yours." Marty nodded miserably, accepting the weight of truth at last. Liz exchanged a grim look with Greg, both knowing justice and healing could only come through confronting the painful realities unearthed this day. Together they guided Marty back through the darkening forest, the storm finally breaking above, rain washing over them, cleansing but never erasing the bitter taste of betrayal and loss. Liz, Greg, and Marty navigated slowly through the dense forest, the storm intensifying with every step, rain pelting their faces and soaking their clothing. The path became increasingly treacherous, roots slick and mud pooling dangerously beneath their feet. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating their surroundings momentarily. Liz's heart lurched as she saw the familiar outline of Resurrection Bay stretching below, a reminder of how close danger loomed. Marty stumbled, slipping on the muddy terrain, and Greg reached out instinctively to steady him. "We have to keep moving," Greg urged, his voice strained above the storm's fury. Liz nodded in agreement, determination set deep in her expression as she pressed forward. They were nearly to the edge of the woods when another flash of lightning revealed a figure blocking their path. Dave, standing rigidly, his face twisted with desperation and anger. "You can't take him!" Dave shouted, his voice nearly lost in the roar of thunder. "It wasn't just Marty. Ed would have destroyed us all. Marty was trying to protect himself. Protect all of us." Liz stepped forward firmly, meeting Dave's wild gaze. "This isn't protection, it's tragedy. We can't let it end here. Marty needs to face what he's done." Dave shook his head vehemently, desperation edging his voice. "And what about the rest of us?" Greg knew. "I knew. Ed knew. We all bear responsibility. Marty acted because we didn't." "Then we all face the truth," Greg interjected sharply, eyes fixed firmly on Dave. "Covering up this tragedy won't erase our guilt. It won't bring back the lives lost." For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain. Slowly, Dave's shoulders slumped, resignation settling over him like a burden finally acknowledged. "Maybe you're right," he conceded, voice barely audible. "But it's not easy accepting it." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Liz replied gently, stepping closer. "We owe it to those we lost." Dave's eyes filled with remorse, nodding solemnly as the weight of reality settled in. Together, the small group trudged through the final stretch of forest, emerging onto the open ground where the village lights flickered faintly through the downpour. As they approached town, figures emerged from homes drawn by curiosity and concern. The village, once silent with secrets, was now confronted openly with its past. Liz stood firm, Marty at her side, accepting both judgment and accountability. Above the storm began to wane clouds, slowly parting to reveal a hint of pale moonlight. Liz exhaled deeply, sensing closure within reach, a painful but necessary step toward healing justice and perhaps eventually peace. The villagers gathered cautiously, their murmurs blending softly with the fading echoes of the storm. Faces illuminated by flickering porch lights revealed a tapestry of emotions: suspicion, relief, sorrow, and tentative hope. Marty stood silently, shoulders hunched under the collective gaze, his guilt etched clearly on his weary features. Liz stepped forward, voice steady yet gentle. "We know the truth now," she began firmly, eyes moving slowly across the crowd. "It isn't easy to accept, but we owe it to those we've lost and to ourselves to face it." Marty acted out of fear, desperation, feelings we all know well. This tragedy isn't his alone. We share it. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, voices hushed yet increasingly reflective. Greg moved beside Liz, his expression grave but resolute. "It's time we heal," he declared quietly, "by remembering, acknowledging our mistakes, and by forgiving." The villagers exchanged glances, expressions softening, gradually, anger fading into shared sorrow. From the back, an elderly woman stepped forward, her frail voice resonant with quiet authority. "We lost too much to carry grudges now," she said solemnly. "It won't bring anyone back. Let justice run its course, but let forgiveness guide us." Liz nodded gratefully, feeling the tension around them ease subtly, yet perceptibly. Marty lifted his eyes, finally meeting the villagers' gaze, accepting their judgment with humility. Quiet conversations began to rise, neighbors embracing tears, mingling with rainwater, washing away years of secrecy and silence. In the following days, authorities came and went, justice unfolding through official channels. Marty cooperated, fully determined to atone. The village found itself caught between grief and newfound unity, bound by shared loss, yet strengthened by mutual resolve. Liz spent her final evening in Resurrection Bay, walking alone along the shoreline, the moonlight casting a soft silver glow across the restless waters. She paused, breathing deeply, feeling a sense of quiet peace despite lingering sorrow. She knew this place intimately, its dangers, its beauty, its capacity to both wound and heal. Turning to face the vast expanse one last time, Liz whispered a silent farewell, promising never to forget those she'd lost, nor the lessons learned. As she stepped away, heading toward a future shaped by resilience and truth,
Thank you for
she
listening
carried
to
within
Brody's
her
stories.
the gentle strength
Until
born
we
from
meet again.
confronting darkness and emerging finally into light.